I'm Alexis Ferguson, work as a lead senior system implementation engineer here with ESC Spectrum. I primarily focus on the refinery and petrochemical sectors, and during this day, we're going to be going over release notes that really impact more of the refinery and petrochemical sectors specifically. So during this, we're going to go over critical changes within StackVision from StackVision versions 6.13 to 6.18. Um, some sites might be wondering what's in these versions that they would want to upgrade StackVision to see and be able to use, and then some of the new features that we've added. But the release notes have a ton of information in them, so this is really to just break that down a bit more and get to kind of the meat of what will impact your facilities. So in 6.13, this goes along with firmware version 6.01. These are 3 new validation types that we added in that data controller firmware. So if you want to use any of those validation types in StackVision and you have that up to the latest firmware, you'll need to be at least StackVision 6.13 or above. If you're not quite at this firmware and you still want to use those validation types, you'll want to upgrade your firmware first to at least 6.01. So with these validation types, one of the main features of these is that currently our data controller builds 1-hour averages based on 1-minute data. So if I say you have a full 60-minute period of valid online data, our data controller will take all 60 of those points, average those together, and then you'll have a 1-hour average. What this feature allows is for you to choose, if you want to build that 1-hour average off of 15-minute averages instead. So we take the first 15 minutes of an hour, average all of those together, then the next 15 minutes, the third 15 minutes, and the fourth 15-minute quadrant. So we have all of those quadrants that we then would take all of those averages and average those together. It provides a different way of building your 1-hour averages. For many sites, this might not be down to necessarily a detail you want to go, but other sites have opinions about how these 1-hour averages should be built, and this allows more versatility with that. So also in 6.13, we have linked phases with your cylinders. If we allowed those phases in cylinder management to be hidden, what this will do is if you have a cylinder linked to that phase can no longer be hidden within cylinder management. And a big part of that is that it may affect some sites where we have triplicate PS9 validation set up, where you have 3 of the low, 3 of the mid, 3 of the high. We typically hide a good number of those phases. So if you have bottles linked to any of those hidden phases, you'll want to make sure that those are no longer linked. Also within 6.13 are movable dialogues with cylinder management, and in the tile or grid view, you can now move those dialog boxes around a bit more to kind of make it easier for how you want to see everything laid out. As well, in 6.13, we added AVLOOKUP. What this feature does is it allows you to pull in data via StackVision's OPC data mapper. This is using OPC UA, and StackVision can pull that data in through the data mapper, and beforehand we could only do numerical values, but now with this feature we are able to pull in strings, and then using this AV lookup table, which is in Stack Studio, there's a table along with it, along with a process now task. We can take those string values, use this feature to correlate those with a numerical value, and replace that so that we can pull in a string where you might have a string value instead of numerical, but you want to correlate it with a numerical value based on some additional information that you'll have, and this allows that functionality. 6.14, we did improve Data Lab. So if you, for instance, have issues with Data Lab being slow, or trying to pull up a lot of data and having trouble with that quantity of data, you'll probably want to upgrade to at least StackVision 6.14. In this feature, in this version, we did significantly improve Data Lab performance, so now you should be able to pull up data more easily without having it be sluggish or take significant periods of time. We also replaced QA test deadlines. This was a feature, this was a tool that you could go into, but we replaced that with a report that now has a process now task associated with it instead, to just take all of the same sorts of information, but display it a bit more cleanly and organized in a report for you all. With terms of StackVision with configuration, um, if when you initially would set up StackVision, you have to go through StackVision with configuration. Uh, in that, you would go through and change like the server that your StackVision client is looking at, or maybe where your site's SQL reports are. You go into StackVision with configuration to adjust that sort of information. What we've done is that beforehand, people would go in there, make a couple changes, and then they'd lose what they had in there before. But now, with as of 6.14, all of that information is cached. So, and if you start changing it, decide that you don't want what you've put in, you can go back and just exit out of it and pull it up, and what was there before will still be there. And to actually save those changes, you have to now click on OK. So a pretty big change with 6.14 is the average data multi-interval report. We added a feature with this report to all sites where you can access this report through reports, and go through and actually change the report's settings as to which intervals and which parameters are displayed on this one single report. So beforehand, we had a bunch of separate reports where you look at like, okay, here's all my 12-month averages, here's all my 1-month averages, but this allows you to put kind of collate a lot of those into one centralized report and see all of that information side by side. And to set this up, there's a GUI in Stack Studio under Plant Regulatory Programs, Permit, Average Data Multi-Interval Report Settings, where you can adjust that information and what all you want to see in that report. Within StackVision 6.15, we had an issue with method code drop-down lists. This also applies to reason codes and action codes, which are more probably what you all will be using more so than method codes, where there was generally a lot of text on those lines, and going through the drop down that would often get cut off, but we've expanded those drop down lists so that now when you go through Data Lab and drop down to change any reason or action codes, you'll be able to actually see the full list of what's there, as with all of the text clearly visible. We've also added the column header for the unit of measure. Beforehand, this was a separate field in Data Lab. So you'd pull up your data and you'd be wondering, okay, what units is this data in? And we had a field in Data Lab where you could, and that field still exists if you want to see it side by side with your data, where it would show the units of measure for every single hour or whatever interval that you pulled up in Data Lab. And what this feature does is it now just displays that unit of measure right at the top of each column. It makes it a lot easier to see your data and be able to just know, okay, I'm pulling this up in Data Lab and there's my units without having to go digging around for it. So in 6.16, email addresses used to not be able to start with numbers. If you went through Task Scheduler, for instance, and say you wanted to email out your daily calibration report, you couldn't put an email address that had numbers in it, and this was affecting some of our customers, either because their emails started with that or their IT wanted to set up groups for them that started with numbers, so that with a group setup, that report could just go to that group and IT could manage the people in it without having to go back through StackVision every single time and change who all was in that email list. So in this case, you can now start an email with numbers such as 123, and that won't be a problem anymore. You still cannot use an IP address in place of a domain name for the um, such as at escspectrum.com. You couldn't change that to an IP address, but you can at least have numbers at the start of that email. We also removed that separate new client menu that we had in StackVision. Beforehand, if with StackVision, we have the old and the new clients where we're working on migrating features over, all of our features over to that new client interface, just to update all of our GUIs. With that, we used to have a separate drop-down that said new client, like if you wanted to get to cylinder management, for instance, or logbook, but now all of that's just directly under tools. You don't have to, that new client drop-down no longer exists. You can just go to tools and see all of the tools that you would want to use from there and pick them there. We've did a lot of updates to charts in StackVision 6.16, made them a lot more user-friendly, a lot better for just looking at data trends, and this tool will let you just kind of plot different parameters on an X and Y axis and just kind of dig into your data and make sure that you can just kind of chart out and trend whatever you want to see with your data without having to export it to Excel. And we made a ton of improvements to this. So if you've used charts in the past, I would um, recommend checking it out again and seeing if it better fits your needs. And that's in 616 if you want these options. We also added options to in this to exclude invalid offline substituted data so that you don't have any of those outliers popping out, and you can just look at your valid online data to make sure all of that's looking the way that you would expect. So in StackVision 617, we've added the events to the ability to track 1 minute downtime events, and in the downtime events duration report and the performance summary report. The issue we were seeing with this was that a lot of the limits for looking specifically at like something like your Peloton, where you need to be tracking every minute of that for those types of downtime tracking. We didn't have a great way of really showing that in a report, but we've added this feature to those reports now so that you can now track and see when was their downtime, and well as any exceedances, for instance, for tracking other such limits like a 1440-minute rolling SO2 pounds total. This gives a lot better view of that data and the ability to see those reports like you would for the rest of your facility data. We also added a feature to CalCheck 60. There was an issue where it was not propagating the data controller flags to downstream parameters. Like if a parameter is using a CO ppm value, but your CO ppm failed its validation, needed to be invalidated, CalCheck 60 would go through as the utility that we use to do that. But it wasn't propagating that flagging to all parameters that used the validated parameter in their equations, or were far down the line and could be linked back to that validated parameter through equation mapping in like SimScape if you wanted to look through and see the equation layout in your system. But we added the ability for CalCheck 60 to now do that automatically, and this was only causing issues in a few unique cases. If for any reason you all don't want this behavior in CalCheck 60 for your specific site, we do have an ability to disable this. So if you upgrade to 617, see maybe some weird stuff with your data, you can call into support, see if, for instance, you need to disable it for your specific site requirements. But in general, this feature is one that most of you will want, and won't really affect much of anything, and may fix some underlying issues that may have not been caught beforehand. With logbook tracking in 617, we now support CalLab and tracking for changes that are made in CalLab and any updates made there as far as expected values or results if in case something didn't pull in quite right. We now offer the ability to track all of those changes, and you can make sure this is enabled by going through in your logbook settings. If you open logbook, there's a gear top right corner. You can click on that and go through and uh, enable this feature. 618, biggest feature in 618 is going to be OPC UA back polling. What this allows is that if StackVision is pulling in data from an OPC UA server, if we have historical access with that OPC UA server, what we can do is backpull that data. So if, for instance, something happened, the server had to be rebooted, this would allow you to go in to the server and actually backpull that data from the OPC UA server that StackVision is getting data from, instead of having to manually export that data from a historian and then import it into StackVision. So that's a huge update. Will save, if anyone's using OPC UA, this will save a bunch of time and is definitely a feature that you will want. Along with this feature, it doesn't occur automatically like we do with data controller backpulling. So if communication is lost between StackVision and the OPC UA server, someone will need to notice that and then manually go into the StackVision server and go through the data mapper for OPC UA and manually do that backpulling. I believe we have the intent to add that feature to the add that feature in the future to where it will automatically go back and grab that data. But for right now, it does have to be done manually whenever you notice data gaps from your OPC UA data. Another big feature in 618 is going to be dashboards. We've done a lot of updates throughout dashboards. In general, they're now much more user-friendly. They have a lot of the features that they were lacking with in regards to consoles. We have the ability now in dashboards to do a lot like move a bunch of objects simultaneously as a group, copy paste objects, just a lot more user-friendly features that were added to those dashboards. If you have used dashboards before and instead decided to opt for our older feature of consoles, I would maybe go back and look at dashboards again with 618 and maybe give that another shot. It still lacks a few features from consoles, like if you have buttons on consoles for closing and opening multiple digital outputs, then that feature is only in consoles. That's the main one that is lacking between the two, as well as a look back period for data. Like if you have a delay where some data shows the past 3 hour of here's my hourly average 3 hours ago, here's it 2 hours ago, here's it 1 hour ago. Then that feature as well is just in consoles, but we are getting dashboards up to where consoles was and just making it a lot better in general and more user friendly. So if you aren't using those two features, I would recommend looking at dashboards if you are still using consoles. If you have any questions or need any assistance, you can go ahead and contact our customer support, support@escspectrum.com, or you can give them a call at 512-250-7901. You can also check out our website, escspectrum.com, as well as our customer community on there to look through any knowledge articles that we have with some more information on these features. We have full release notes, as well as you can contact support through that customer portal. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you if now have a better idea of the features in 613 through 618 where you may want to consider upgrading if you haven't done so already.